This morning, in a suburb of Texas, someone set their alarm clock before 6 so they could be in a chapel by 7:30, as they've been doing for days now. It's not a gesture that usually makes the news, because in every corner of the Catholic world, there are people who get up in the dark to make it on time to the first Mass of the morning. Except that this week, in that very chapel, getting up early has become the most talked about thing in American Catholicism, and starting tomorrow, it may no longer be possible. The chapel is located in Arlington, on a street named after Mount Carmel, and belongs to a monastery of discalced Carmelite nuns that no longer exists on paper. At the top of their website, above everything else, is a 4-line announcement that is both today's news and the answer to more than 3 years of stories. He says that on August 16th, a bishop of the Society of St. Pius X celebrated the holy sacrifice of the Mass in their chapel, and that he would continue throughout the week. He adds verbatim that he will celebrate the 7:30 Mass until Friday the 21st, that is, until today, and closes with 3 words that weigh more than all the rest. Everyone is welcome. The bishop who ascends the altar is Bernard Fellet, one of the 4 consecrated in Icon in 1988, and this is enough to explain why 4 lines have gone around the Catholic world. To truly understand what's happening inside that chapel this morning, however, you have to line up 7 dates, because only by looking at them together can you see the picture. The first was in April 2023, when a conflict began between this community and the Bishop of Fort Worth that has never stopped since. The nuns tell it in their own words, and they are very harsh words, which I report as their statements, and not as facts ascertained by a court. They write that it all began with a false accusation against our mother prioress, and that from that moment on, the matter was pursued incessantly by the bishop for his own ends. The conflict soon spilled over beyond the confines of the church and into the civil courts of Texas, with lawsuits, injunctions, and appeals dragging on for months before state judges. Meanwhile, a bishop's decision against a nun was overturned by Rome, which shows how controversial the matter was even within the structures of the church. The second date is August 2 years ago, when the community was welcomed into association by the Fraternity of St. Pius X, which from that moment ensured its sacramental life. The third came a few months later in October, when the nuns were declared dismissed from the Carmelite order and from religious life, accused of having abandoned the Catholic faith. Their reply, published on October 30th, and still visible on their website today, contains the phrase they have repeated ever since, whenever someone asks them if they still consider themselves nuns. They write, "The vows we have professed to God cannot be revoked or taken away, and by virtue of them, we belong to Him and are His." In the same text, they reject the most serious accusation with a very simple argument, recalling that they pray every day for the Pope and for their own bishop, and that therefore no one can say that they have left the church. And they add a line that is worth listening to twice. "Disputes about man's desires and man-made rules do not exclude us from the church." The fourth date is November 28th of the same year, when the Dicastery for Institutes of Consecrated Life formally suppressed the monastery of the Holy Trinity. Then 20 months pass, during which the story hits the newspapers, until we reach the fifth date, which is August 14th of this year. That day, the Bishop of Fort Worth published a pastoral letter that we read in full in the video 5 days ago, and which listed 3 places with their street and house numbers. Among those 3 addresses was also this monastery, defined as extinct, and described as composed of women who had been released from their vows for abandoning the Catholic faith. The letter also said that knowingly providing those places with public, organizational, material, or financial support may result in excommunication for the faithful who do so. Anyone who reads that sentence immediately understands what it means in concrete terms for a person in Arlington who gets up before 6 to go to the 7:30 Mass. And here we return to the chapel, because the sixth date is August 16th, that is, 48 hours after the publication of that pastoral letter. In those 48 hours, the nuns did not publish a polemical reply. They did not respond point by point, and they did not ask anyone to take a stand for them. They did only one thing, and that was to place an announcement at the top of their page that a bishop from the society would be celebrating Mass for them every morning for a week. Under that announcement, they wrote a sentence that at a time like this is almost more sensational than the announcement itself, and it is an invitation extended to everyone. Everyone is welcome. And they closed with a line addressed to the reader, promising that each one will be remembered every day in the Mass and during the recitation of the divine office. At this point, it must be clearly stated that there is a completely opposite reading of everything that has been said so far, and which has serious arguments. Those who support it recalled that the suppression of a monastery and the dismissal of vows are acts of the competent authority, and that a community cannot declare them ineffective on its own. He also notes that the Society of St. Pius X today has no recognized canonical status, and that after the consecrations in July, the Holy See declared 6 of its bishops excommunicated. And he points out that a community that chooses who administers the sacraments is in fact building its own path, no matter how sincerely it professes to be Catholic. Those who defend the nuns, for their part, do not respond on this ground, but rather open another, and these days they are doing so with a very precise approach. He notes that in the same weeks, in Peru, an official of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith placed coca leaves in an Andean rite of offering to Mother Earth. The meeting had been presented by the Vatican media as part of the preparation for the Pope's trip in November, and there was not a single line about it in the official account of that ceremony. The conclusion they draw is that of double standards, and it must be said that those who reject it have a ready answer, because for many Andean Catholics, that gesture is a cultural thanksgiving for the harvest and not an act of worship. They are two legally different matters, and those who compare them do so to highlight a disproportion, not to argue that they are the same thing. Meanwhile, as we discuss, the 7th date is today, Friday, August 21st, which according to their own announcement is the last day of this week of Masses. Starting tomorrow, only one thing will change. The bishop who ascended that altar every morning will likely no longer be there, and the chapel will return to its usual rhythm. What does not change, however, is everything else, because the suppression remains written, the pastoral letter remains published, and the 3 addresses remain where they are. The 7:30 line also remains with the same people who will continue to get up in the dark, knowing exactly what their bishop told those who do so. And above all else, there remains on their website that 3-word invitation addressed to anyone who wishes to stop by, which up until this evening, no one has collected. What do you think? If you liked the video, comment Amen. God bless you.